Okay, so you've brought us a topic today that really pushes boundaries, doesn't it? It's complex, often misunderstood.
Mm,
Minor attracted persons, or MAPs.
definitely. It's a difficult subject.
And our goal here, really, is to try and unpack the information we do have. Not shy away, but look at some assumptions, maybe challenge them a bit,
Yeah.
especially around how common this attraction might be.
Right. And crucially, why having a more, let's say, nuanced conversation actually matters.
Exactly. We want to give you a clearer perspective without getting overwhelmed. We'll
Yeah.
take it step by step because, the first thing you run into is this intense stigma.
Oh, absolutely. The weight of that stigma is immense.
Mm.
It's not just disapproval, it fundamentally shapes the entire conversation or lack thereof. It dictates what we hear, what research gets done, even.
Yeah, it really dictates what's allowed to be discussed openly. Fear just seems to crowd out the facts almost immediately.
It does, and that stigma feels like the first major obstacle if you're trying to understand anything beyond the surface level. It paints this picture almost instantly where attraction means criminality. Full stop.
No room for anything else. But what does that actually do? What are the real-world effects of
Yeah.
that kind of snap judgment?
Well, the impact is pretty significant. On one hand, it creates this enormous fear for individuals who might be experiencing these feelings, fear of judgment, fear of legal consequences. And that fear, it stops people from seeking help. If our goal is prevention, and surely it is, then making people afraid to come forward seems, well, counterproductive.
Yeah, it cuts off a potential avenue for intervention.
Exactly. And then you have the narratives, often amplified by media, that focus on the most extreme cases, ignoring the psychological complexities.
That connection, or rather the blurring of the line between having an attraction and acting on it, the media does seem to jump straight there. It's almost like the thought itself is treated as the act.
It often is. And what gets missed is that fundamental distinction in psychology between an internal experience, a thought, a feeling, an attraction, and an external behavior.
Right.
By collapsing those two, we ignore the reality that many, perhaps most, individuals with these attractions never act on them. And we also miss the chance to understand why. What factors differentiate those who act from those who don't? That's crucial for prevention.
And this sort of societal panic, it can lead to policies based more on that fear than on evidence, right?
Precisely. Which might not be the most effective way to actually protect children or address the issue constructively.
Okay, so let's shift to the data then. What do we actually know? Or
Mhm.
maybe, like you said, what don't we know about how common these attractions are? It feels like counting ghosts sometimes.
That's a good way to put it. Estimating prevalence is...
Yeah, it's incredibly challenging, the stigma we just talked about. It means very few people are going to self-report this.
Makes sense. And then the studies that do exist often use really different methods, different questions, different populations.
Yeah.
It makes comparing them or drawing firm conclusions very, very difficult. It's like assembling a puzzle with pieces from different boxes.
But people have tried to put numbers on it. I
Yeah.
remember seeing that 2018 study. It was a Journal of Sex Research. It floated some figures that might surprise people who think this is incredibly rare.
Yes. That study is often cited. It suggested somewhere in the range of 1 to 5% of adult males and a smaller percentage of females might experience these attractions.
1 to 5%. That does sound higher than many might assume.
It does. But, and this is really important, we have to be cautious with those numbers. They're estimates based on specific samples, often not representative of the whole population.
Okay.
There are huge limitations, sample biases, cultural factors, the ethics of asking. All sorts of things can skew the results. So while it suggests it might be more common than zero, pinning down an exact figure is still really problematic.
So why is it so hard to get better data? Is it just the sensitivity? Or are there other roadblocks?
It's definitely not lack of interest from researchers. The ethical tightrope is a major factor. How do you study this rigorously while protecting everyone involved, especially when discussing potential harm to minors? It's incredibly complex.
I can imagine.
And then there's funding. Research into highly stigmatized, controversial topics, well, it's often not prioritized. Resources are limited.
But you mentioned experts like Dr. Jesse Bering who argue passionately that we need this research. Why is it seen as so vital, despite the difficulties?
Yeah, the argument is basically that without reliable data, we're flying blind. If we had a clearer picture of prevalence and a better understanding of the experiences involved,
Then what?
then we could potentially target resources more effectively. Think therapy, education, actual harm prevention strategies. Right now, speculation and myths tend to fill the void left by solid data.
And that void doesn't help anyone, least of all potential victims.
Precisely. The lack of good data might actually be hindering our ability to protect children effectively.
Okay, this leads us to something you touched on earlier, which feels absolutely critical. The difference between having an attraction and acting on it. Seems obvious maybe, but it gets blurred constantly.
It's fundamental. And research, like work cited by the American Psychological Association, consistently underscores this. Attraction doesn't automatically equal behavior. It just doesn't.
So many people with these attractions, they don't act.
Correct. Many never act on those feelings. In fact, a significant number actively seek help, like therapy, to manage their attractions ethically and ensure they don't cause harm.
That's a key point, isn't it? That people are actively managing this.
It is. And when we just conflate the feeling with the act, we fuel the stigma, yes, but we also completely ignore the efforts of those individuals who are managing these challenges responsibly and are committed to not offending.
You know, the sources mention groups like virtuous pedophiles. Their existence itself seems to highlight this very distinction, however uncomfortable the name might be for many.
It does. The existence of support groups for non-offending individuals, whatever you think of them, shows that there's a population experiencing these feelings who are actively trying to live lawfully and prevent harm. They often focus on mutual support and reinforcing that non-offending commitment.
It really underscores the internal struggle some people must face.
Absolutely.
And it seems obvious then that access to mental health support would be crucial. If someone wants to manage these feelings safely, therapy seems like a vital tool for prevention.
It really is. Therapy can provide coping strategies, ways to manage distress, techniques to reduce the risk of any harmful action. But, and here we are back at stigma.
It stops them from seeking that help.
Often, yes. The fear of being judged, of legal trouble, even just of being misunderstood, it creates a massive barrier. It's a terrible catch-22. The very thing that could help prevent harm is made inaccessible by fear.
The sources brought up Project Dunkelfeld in Germany as maybe a different approach. What's notable about that?
Dunkelfeld is interesting because it offers anonymous counseling and therapy specifically for people struggling with unwanted sexual interests, including attraction to minors.
Anonymously.
Yes, crucially. And the early results seem promising in terms of helping individuals manage their feelings and preventing harm. It suggests that offering accessible, non-judgmental support could be a really valuable part of a broader prevention strategy.
A potential model, perhaps?
Potentially, yes. It addresses that fear barrier directly.
Okay, so shifting slightly, where do these attractions even come from? The sources suggest it's not simple, not just a choice or a moral failure.
No, definitely not simple. The current understanding is that the origins are likely very complex, a mix of factors. We're talking developmental experiences, psychological factors, maybe even biological or neurological influences.
Oh, nature, nurture, potentially.
Possibly. Some research points towards early life experiences, others towards subtle neurological differences. But the key thing is there's no single cause that everyone agrees on. It's multifaceted.
Which really underlines the need for that nuanced approach you mentioned, moving beyond just vilification.
Exactly. If the causes are complex, the solutions probably need to be complex too.
Which implies that just relying on punishment, while necessary for illegal acts, isn't enough on its own. It won't address the root causes or help someone manage things responsibly.
Precisely. Accountability for harm is non-negotiable, obviously. But punitive measures alone don't get at the why or support those who are trying not to cause harm. A comprehensive approach needs both accountability and understanding, intervention, support where appropriate.
This whole discussion really seems to connect to bigger societal conversations, doesn't it? About sexuality, about consent, mental health.
Absolutely. How we as a society talk about difficult aspects of sexuality and mental health directly impacts our ability to deal with issues like this effectively.
How so?
Well, if the conversation is dominated by fear and misinformation, it stifles the kind of open, evidence-based dialogue we need. That dialogue is essential for developing policies that actually work, that protect kids effectively, and that maybe offer pathways for those struggling but not offending. It affects our capacity for empathy, perhaps, and our ability to protect vulnerable people.
So let's bring it back to the start.
Yeah.
Why does trying to understand this prevalence, trying to get better data, even matter? Beyond the numbers, what's really at stake?
At the end of the day, it's about people. It's about prevention, getting more accurate information, fostering a more informed public conversation. These things can help dismantle harmful myths,
Right.
and they can guide policies that genuinely protect children based on evidence, not just fear, and maybe also find ways to support non-offending individuals who are trying to manage these difficult attractions. It's about moving from just reacting out of fear to acting based on understanding.
Because the silence, the stigma, it doesn't actually help protect anyone. It isolates people and leaves society flying blind, as you said earlier.
Yeah, exactly that. The silence can actually perpetuate harm by preventing understanding and effective action. Approaching this with rigor, with empathy, with a commitment to evidence that seems essential if we want a safer, more understanding world.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, we've looked at the heavy weight of stigma and how it shapes everything. We've tackled the difficulty of getting clear data on prevalence, but acknowledged the estimates suggest it's not zero. We've hammered home that critical difference between attraction and action, noting many don't act and seek help. We touched on the complex, not simple origins.
And the need to move beyond just fear-based responses.
Right. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Yeah, perhaps consider this. How might our own societal discomfort, that really intense stigma we feel around this topic, actually get in the way? Could it inadvertently hinder our efforts both to protect children effectively and to support those who are struggling with these attractions responsibly, trying not to cause harm?
It's a challenging question.
It is. And continuing to explore these complexities, questioning our own assumptions, that feels like a necessary part of navigating this really difficult territory.